You go to mental hospital. You go to mental hospital.
All right, dear friends.
I am Messiah.
They pay you more. They pay you more. Okay. All right, dear friends. Now that we don't have much disturbance, let's go through all the reasons quickly as to why Islam should be banned. Islam should be banned in our nation because Islam is seditious. Islam should be banned from our nation because Islam is violent and hateful towards Jews and Christians. Islam should be banned from our nation because Islam is a terrorist religion. Like the gentleman over there. God knows what terrorism he is preparing for. Islam should be banned because Islam is a genocidal religion. Islam should be banned from our nation because Islam is a big-time, sustained real estate fraud that has been going on for centuries right now. Islam should be banned because you cannot believe when a Muslim signs a document in our nation, you will never be able to know if the sign is trustworthy or not, because Muslims have been asked deliberately to mislead, sign without batting an eye. Even if the claim is a big-time lie, they would come and sign. So Islam needs to be banned because all the signatures that we have of Muslims on perhaps driving licenses, on passport applications, visa applications, and all such important documentation, we cannot trust the veracity of the truthfulness of all the statements made. Why? Because Quran has asked them deliberately to lie. So Islam should be banned. Islam should be banned because it exercises physical and mental coercion at the point of accepting Islam and even at the point of leaving Islam. Can you imagine? My dear friends, you may never want to be a Muslim, yet Islam requires you to handle the Quran in a particular manner, even in our nation. Can you imagine this utter nonsense? You may think that just because you have a book at your home and because you have paid money to acquire it, you can take it and use it at your will. That's how we treat books, don't we? You can take a book, read a book, put the book on the table, put it somewhere else if you like. But can you imagine, in the UK, we have been forced, not through British law, but through Sharia, unwritten, but enforced, even by our police force, to handle the Quran in a particular manner. And when that isn't happening, Muslims come and threaten you with violence, and the police will have to come and apologize. It has happened multiple times in our nation. In other words, Islam exerts very violent physical and mental coercion even towards non-Muslims in our Christian land. Another good reason to ban Islam, to put Islam in the bin forever and say, look, this junk will never ever get any respect that it doesn't deserve. Any respect, because it's entire junk, and therefore it will get only what it deserves from us in our Christian nation. So Islam must be banned. If by any mistake you become a Muslim and you think, oh no, what a lot of nonsense, And if you want to leave Islam, what happens? What is the penalty under Sharia?
That's it.
Unwritten, yet enforced, even in our nation. When you want to leave Islam, death. Death. So another good reason to ban Islam. And people such as Hashim are running away. Running away like cowards. Because they can't face reality. They run away as cowards, week in, week out. I don't know why they show up at Speaker's Corner when they haven't got the courage to stand up to scrutiny. Are you Muslims? You are. Please come. Please come. Sure. Yeah, bye. Please tell me, what is the penalty?
Treason from the Islamic State itself. Not someone who's believing in treason against the Islamic State.
I did not use the word treason, you are using it. Don't put words in my mind. My question is clear. What is the penalty for apostasy? Did you hear that, my dear friends? The penalty for apostasy, can you please be a bit louder for the benefit of everyone?
It's, I'll play his game. It's death.
It's death. The penalty for apostasy is death. And would you like Sharia to be in the UK? Egyptian. So Palestine. Coming to you. According to the book, you as a Muslim, take every step to impose Sharia in every part of the world. You're not aware of this?
Take every step to impose.
What steps have you been taking?
We don't know. So, okay, if you look at non-Muslims pay taxes, pay tax.
Please tell me.
And that's what I'm saying. It's way jizya pay tax.
Is jizya part of Sharia? Yes, so in other words, they'll be subject to Sharia.
Jizya gives them a route to have their own jurisprudence.
Is jizya part of Sharia or not? In other words, as part of Sharia, Muslims think that you are extremely generous and allow them to live. That's what you do. In other words, you impose Sharia in a very nasty manner. That's what you do. So is jizya part of Sharia?
Okay, you impose that part of Sharia. You don't impose jurisprudence on the whole thing. I don't hold you accountable the same way I hold another.
Can I choose not to pay jizya?
You're in Islamic State. Same way in the UK, you have to pay income tax.
They're protesting in support of
Because they separate church and state. Because they separate the state and the religion.
In the UK, for whatever reason, not for the reason for whatever reason, we are a noble state that we don't levy a tax because you are a Muslim. We don't. If we did, it would be utterly ungodly. Yet in Islam, you have the audacity to implement Sharia by forcing non-Muslims. Now let me move on.
No.
I don't need an explanation for that.
I'll explain.
Please explain.
Because that's misrepresented. So my point is that every country, no matter what ideology, whether you separate church and state, whether you are an Islamic state, whether you're a Muslim state, you're going to impose tax on the people, on everything. That's how governments function, right? So if Islam comes and they say, we're going to make the non-Muslims pay a lower tax than Muslims, by the way. Jizya is less than zakat. So we're going to make the non-Muslims pay less tax than the actual Muslims. How is that, what did you say it was? Forcing them or in a very nasty manner. How is that nasty?
Anyone who says, oh, I am an Islamic government, I understand you are not a Muslim, Yet I'm going to make you pay a tax, regardless of what amount it is. I'm going to say, get please listen. Because Jizya, Surah 9, Ayah 29 is very clear, is made to be paid under the threat of violence, fight against. That's how it begins.
I'm not a scholar. I don't know.
That's right. It's
Look
there.
it up.
Yeah.
I doubt
Please
it.
read. When you go home, please read Surah 9, Ayah 29. Now, let me ask you the remaining. Do you appreciate that according to Islam, you are supposed to enforce Sharia across the world? Do you appreciate it? If I show, okay, let me show you. When I show you, what would you do?
No, okay, look.
Would you take
Of
that to
course, the idea is we spread the Ummah, right? And of course, the Ummah will be under Sharia. When you say enforce Sharia, you're misrepresenting what we're actually supposed to do.
Okay, let me read. So, is it enforced? Is it? Surah 2, Ayah 193. Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 2, Al-Baqarah, Ayah 198. The whole body should be so, Surah 2, Ayah 1, did I say 198?
We don't want it with that. We don't want dialect with that. You know that. We don't want to dialect with that. They're looking for weak.
What does it say? Fight them.
Wait. I'll go from 180.
Sure. Can I quickly read this first and then we can go? Surah 2, Ayah 193. Fight them until there is no more fitna. And religion is for Allah. And religion is all for Allah. So fight.
If they cease, then there is to be no aggression, except against the oppressor. How is that unjust?
Sure. We'll go through one symmetry. First of all, do we agree? Target is that religion is all for Allah. In other words, Islam should be the religion in a land, and until that is achieved, you are supposed to fight. Agree? So what is it?
Okay, fight them until there is some fitna. Fitna means corruption.
What?
Evil.
Which means
Immoral.
which is non-Islam.
No.
What is fitna?
Evil.
So if I am a Christian,
Bad.
one second, listen. If I am a Christian, is that fitna or not?
That's corrupt.
It's not.
Okay, your claim is I'm a Christian. No, that's not true. What do you do with that belief? Can be corruption, can be good.
As a Christian, historically, Jesus is God. Is that corruption?
That's corruption of the Bible.
So in your mind, being a Christian, as I understand, is corruption. In your mind, is in your mind. In your mind. Do you have any evidence for the fact the Bible is corrupt?
I'd say the Quran itself says.
In other words, you haven't got any independent evidence.
I know some.
That's
Like I said, I'm not a scholar, but I know
in other
some.
words, you don't know.
Paul wrote it. Didn't Paul write the New Testament like 300 years after? Yeah. Paul wrote it like
Listen to me.
when did Paul write the New Testament?
Same century.
When? Because Jesus was alive a certain period, and Paul was alive a certain period.
Paul's first church, 18 years after Jesus. Almost been. Jesus is
So he's a contemporary to the other eyewitnesses. So he wasn't an eyewitness himself.
Paul wrote something clear. Happy. Alluded. Now I'm
Like I said, I think we should.
happy.
Okay, even if it's 10, 20.
No. I'll be happy that I have helped you understand, despite the fact that come across as someone who can be sensitive, that without having a clue, when you stand up,
I did exaggerate.
not exaggerate,
I exaggerate.
lying.
Okay, no, before that statement, I said I don't know, but didn't he say something? So
When you don't know, yet you will boldly claim when you lie.
I exaggerate. I retract.
What is exaggerate?
I retract.
In other words, your idea the Bible is corrupt. Now coming back here. So don't go back to things about which you haven't got evidence. Focus on the stuff here. I have every evidence that Jesus was born, that he died and he came back to life.
You have
I have.
historical evidence.
All evidence virtually suggests to the fact that Sharia resurrection. Have you got any evidence?
Like I said, I'm not a scholar. I didn't.
In which case, that's fine.
But I do know something. I have studied I've studied logic. And logically, how can a God die?
In other words, you haven't got any evidence. That's fine. I need to come back here
No,
also.
because historically, because you're using historical information. That's your information, right? What people wrote, testimonies. Right? You're using testimony of other people, and you're trying to rely on historical data. I'm saying don't rely on historical data. Rely on something even more true, logic, reason, something even more verifiable.
I want to get back because the point is based on evidence which I can show later for you and show that if you are again either being a liar or deliberate completely. We'll deal with that later. So now we'll focus here. What am I saying? I am saying I follow based on evidence that Jesus is God. You are going to, against all evidence, call my belief corruption. And what you're going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to fight me. Fight them until there is no more fitna, until religion is for Allah. In other words, we can both agree that even though I have evidence, like a reasonable man would have, and I follow evidence and truth like a reasonable man would be, sensible man would be, you are going to, in your deluded state, in your lying state, you are going to come and say, look, don't believe in evidence, leave behind the idea that Jesus is God, and I'm going to kill you because that's fitna. That's what you're going to do. Is that what you believe?
Can we read the whole thing?
Yeah, please read. Read the first part and tell me if I've got it wrong, please.
Fight them until there is no more fitness, until religion, worship is acknowledged to be a God. So, what you're doing is you took fitna and applied it to yourself. Corruption. You're applying it to yourself, right? Like you're a Christian, that must mean Muslims see me as corrupt, so they will fight me. Let me do another interpretation. Maybe fight doesn't mean I physically fight. Maybe fight is challenge your belief, fight your belief. The both.
So stick to both. Don't lie.
Yeah, he did both. He fought ideology and he fought wars.
Listen to me.
What's your name?
Because I know, unlike you, who doesn't know you, I know outside of Sure. In other words, fight. Don't say fight in terms of intellectual argument. Fight includes physical fight too. Because Muhammad is your example to follow according to the Quran. And what did Muhammad do? Mounted the sword and fought and killed and wiped out the Jews from Medina. He did that. Wherever Jews had to be found, he slaughtered. I can go there later now. So in other words, we know what fight means. Leave behind your lives. So what does fight mean?
Okay, no, you proved, because you made the claim fight is physically fight, kill.
Also.
It can be something.
We agree.
It can be something else.
Listen to me, please. as a Muslim, when the Quran says fight, you are supposed to physically fight too.
Why does it necessitate?
Because that's what Muhammad did.
You're saying because of the Sunnah as well.
Exactly.
Okay, but the Sunnah is also fighting ideology.
Yes.
Not just
So in other words, those guys show up here at Speaker's Corner even though they are clueless. You're Islamic apologists. They make absolutely no sense whatsoever. They've been here for years and they run away from me. Absolutely no sense. They haven't got it. Not just you. Like you say you're not a scholar. You say,
I'm not a
would you
scholar, I'm not learned.
Absolutely.
Very new.
Would you believe? Your Islamic apologists who show up, including this gentleman, the gentleman in the hat there. He looks already terrified. Can you see? Including him. No, he's here for years, couple of decades now, and he doesn't have a clue either. In other words, all Muslims have no clue because Islam is a clueless religion. It is an insane religion. It leads to mental issues, deep mental issues. It leads to you tried lying twice already. You tried cheekily.
I kept saying I don't know.
Did you lie already twice? Caught on camera. It is
One of them. I exaggerated. And I retracted the statement.
all is someone who lived in the first century without having a clue that he lived in the third century. It's a lie. You deliberately did that. You know what an exaggeration is? If you are
You take 1 year and you make it 300.
that's exactly. That's it.
Hyperbole.
Don't repeat your lies. Let's stick to this. So fight them until there is no fitna. In other words, we can agree that Muslims have been asked, please come and help him. Don't take him away.
Yalla, 1 minute. We have 1 minute. Go. 1 minute, go.
So in other words, as a Muslim, you're supposed to fight until the religion of Islam is imposed everywhere. That's what they're supposed to do. But if they cease, there is no cease, then there is to be no aggression except against the oppressors. How is that unjust? Good.
Only the
I'll
oppressor.
explain. No, let me explain. One second. You know what oppression is in Islam? You know what oppression is in Islam? Oppression is like a Christian being, following evidence and insisting that your ideas are wrong.
That's what we think oppression is.
That is what the Quran says oppression is. You can read Surah Ayah 148. You can read when you go home. Around 148 to 150. Please read. It will tell you, and you can go to 214. Surah 2, Ayah 214 to 216. Go home and find out what is oppression. Anyone who tries to reason will tell you follow an evidence-less religion. A religion that goes against all evidence. That's oppression. In other words, what I mean by in other words, as a Muslim, you're asked to impose Islamic Sharia. Please come here, my dear friends. My dear friends, please come here. Nice meeting you. Sooner, my dear friends, leave Islam. Don't tell them. Don't tell them because apostasy is Islamic Sharia. Don't tell them. They look like mafia gang. Don't tell them.
At least he had the guts to get up.
What's that?
At least he had the guts to get up and talk to you.
That's right. That's it. You have the guts to talk to me? No, you see that? No. I said, you have the guts to talk to me? What do you say? No. You have the guts to talk to me? No. Ask him. Okay, look, he doesn't want. All right. Are you a Muslim? Any Muslims? No. Any Muslims?